Bonjour à tous, donc je m'appelle Élodie. Du comité de programmation de la CSPC. Et de ce fait, il me fait plaisir de vous introduire la session plénière d'aujourd'hui, la première journée de notre belle conférence 2023, qui est intitulée « La science en temps de conflit, comment soutenir et limiter l'impact ». Donc, c'est une merveilleuse session plénière qui est organisée par le FRQ. Et puis, nous allons vous encourager à tweeter sur vos événements et vos panels préférés en mentionnant le @Science Policy et le hashtag CSPC 2023. Enfin, n'oubliez pas de remplir le questionnaire d'évaluation sur cette session plénière pour pouvoir nous donner un peu de feedback qui nous est très pertinent pour améliorer de façon constante notre conférence annuelle. J'espère que vous apprécierez énormément ce panel. Je vais faire une petite introduction en anglais et je passe la parole à M. Lebel. Donc, good afternoon everyone. My name is
Hello everyone, bonjour tout le monde, je suis Elodie, je fais partie du comité organisateur de la conférence et j'ai donc le privilège de vous présenter la prochaine séance plénière qui s'appelle « La science dans le contexte des conflits, comment limiter l'impact des conflits » organisée par FRQ. Donc n'hésitez pas à tweeter vos moments préférés au sujet de cette conférence en utilisant l'adresse hashtag Science Policy ou hashtag CSPC 2023. Et aussi, n'oubliez pas de remplir le questionnaire d'évaluation à la fin. Il sera très utile pour que nous puissions corriger le tir et améliorer sans cesse le contenu de la programmation pour l'année prochaine. Et pour terminer, je vous souhaite une bonne séance. Et maintenant, je passe le micro à mon collègue Jean Lebel, qui sera votre animateur. Oui, le micro fonctionne.
Bonjour, good afternoon.
Alors, c'est un privilège d'être coincé entre la dernière séance et le cocktail qui s'en vient. Et je vais faire des interventions en français. Et il y a d'interprétation simultanée, donc vous pouvez vous procurer des écouteurs au fond de la salle pour écouter l'une ou l'autre langue officielle.
De parler de science en temps de conflit. J'ai présidé le CRDI, le Centre de recherche et développement, durant 10 ans. J'y ai travaillé 26 ans. J'ai fait face à de nombreuses situations. Mais maintenant, je suis à l'Institut de la francophonie pour le développement durable, au Conseil d'orientation. Et je tiens à remercier Rémi Quirion, le scientifique en chef des fonds de recherche du Québec, pour avoir organisé, m'avoir demandé de modérer ce panel. Et ce panel ne vise qu'un seul but: élargir les perspectives, donner une perspective d'ici et d'ailleurs sur la science en temps de conflit. So it's a privilege to be here, thanks to the chief.
Donc c'est un privilège d'être ici. Nous avons le scientifique en chef qui est avec nous, et c'est lui qui m'a demandé justement d'animer ce panel. Je suis directeur de l'Institut de francophonie pour le développement durable, et nous sommes là pour élargir les perspectives sur la science en temps de conflit et comment la soutenir et limiter l'impact des conflits. Est-ce que Julie est avec nous? Nous avons une chercheuse en exil de l'Iran qui est actuellement en Allemagne et qui a vraiment un récit extraordinaire à nous donner. Est-ce qu'elle est ici?
Hello everyone.
Ah, la voilà.
I'm fine with you. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me.
Alors, le panel va se dérouler comme ceci. Je vais faire une brève introduction de nos panélistes. Ensuite, nous avons 3 questions posées aux panélistes et ensuite nous ouvrirons le parquet aux questions. Donc, préparez-vous à poser vos questions, faire vos commentaires et partager avec nous votre vision des choses, et nos panélistes seront là pour réagir et répondre à vos questions. Alors, donc, voici nos panélistes qui sont tous des experts. Nous avons à l'écran une scientifique au Centre international. Elle est d'Iran. Elle est professeure adjointe de physique à l'Institut des sciences avancées et de la science fondamentale en Iran. De décembre 2015 jusqu'à sa démission en septembre 2022, où elle a participé à une manifestation et c'était une démission motivée par une contestation et elle est aussi coprésidente du projet de sciences en exil à l'Académie mondiale des sciences. Donc, bienvenue à NC. Et à ma gauche, nous avons Caroline Jabet.
Santé. Elle a été une ingénieure dans sa plus jeune incarnation à l'École centrale de Lyon. Elle a un doctorat en molecular biophysics, en biophysique moléculaire de l'École centrale de Paris et elle a fait un postdoc à Biophysics Department à Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. Elle amène ici une perspective assez intéressante, une perspective du FRQ, particulièrement avec son expérience, mais aussi le programme Sciences en exil dont elle saura certainement nous parler. À côté de Carole, il y a Myria Tridge, qui est professeure de droit constitutionnel et de droit international des droits de la personne au département des sciences juridiques de l'Université du Québec à Montréal, l'UQAM, mon alma mater. She's the co-chair of the Scholar at Risk.
Elle est coprésidente du comité directeur canadien. Et professeur Trish a collaboré avec plusieurs organismes de défense des droits de la personne.
Merci.
Et nous avons professeur d'histoire et titulaire de la chaire à l'Université Sainte-Mary's en Nouvelle-Écosse. Elle se spécialise dans la migration des minorités religieuses au 18e et 19e siècle. Et elle cherche à soutenir l'intégration des réfugiés et exilés. Elle fait partie du comité directeur de sciences en exil et elle a fondé une académie à Edinburgh. Elle a cofondé aussi l'initiative pour les jeunes et avec la Fondation Royale et elle a participé aussi au programme des artistes déplacés. Voilà. Donc, voilà les panélistes pour cet après-midi. Et nous allons parler de façon succincte du monde qui change. Et évidemment, tout le monde fait référence aux actualités, le conflit en Ukraine, le conflit entre Israël et Hamas. Mais il faut voir au-delà de ces conflits. Et il faut parler de la science, non seulement en termes de la recherche, mais aussi en termes de l'enseignement, de la collaboration et aussi du financement. Et ces conflits, que ce soit des conflits armés ou non, ont beaucoup d'implications. Dans le cas de conflits armés, évidemment, ils mettent votre sécurité à risque. Et je me rappelle justement au Liban, le seul endroit qui n'a pas été bombardé pendant la guerre a été l'université américaine à Beyrouth, qui était considérée comme un espace qu'il ne fallait pas toucher. Les gens ne se rappellent pas de ce genre de détails. mais ça vous met aussi à risque. Regardez le nombre de gens qui, en exprimant une opinion, se retrouvent en prison ou qui sont muselés et ne peuvent pas participer au genre de recherche qu'ils veulent faire. Je me rappelle, pendant le régime Pinochet, nous avions un président qui était en exil et personne ne pouvait financer de la recherche sur les sciences économiques sous le régime Pinochet. Et donc c'est par l'entremise d'organismes avec lesquels je travaillais auparavant que nous avons remédié à la situation. Mais ce n'est pas nécessairement dans des situations aussi dramatiques qu'il faut penser au problème. L'éducation est priorisée par certains pays et moins par d'autres. Combien d'argent est-ce que nous investissons dans la recherche et dans les universités? Pensez aussi à d'autres situations. Le changement climatique, par exemple. La migration. La migration forcée. Tous ces phénomènes ont un impact sur la communauté scientifique et les membres des familles des scientifiques. Alors pensez à ces conflits qui débordent de nos frontières. Pensez au fait qu'il y a non seulement un impact sur les chercheurs et l'institution, mais sur l'avenir du pays. Et ça peut avoir un impact sur la résilience de ces pays. Et en temps de conflit, il y a aussi les familles. Qu'arrive-t-il quand ces chercheurs sont invités ou bénéficient de ressources pour qu'ils puissent visiter notre pays ou d'autres pays en situation d'exil? Tout cela, la recherche en exil est donc le sujet principal de notre panel aujourd'hui. Pendant la conversation, nous allons essayer de voir est-ce que nous sommes en train de nous féliciter alors que nos efforts sont plus ou moins efficaces ou nous n'avons pas le succès que nous croyons avoir. Bon, alors j'ai pris beaucoup de temps et je vais maintenant donner la parole à nos panélistes. Nancy, je vais commencer avec vous. Vous êtes en Allemagne. Alors, donnez-nous, faites-nous un peu le récit de la raison pour laquelle vous avez choisi l'exil et pourquoi il est important de la recherche en exil. Et parlez-nous un petit peu de votre parcours.
Yeah, thank you so very much, Jean, for giving me the floor. I'm really happy to be with you, although virtually.
Je suis très heureux.
The point is that before becoming in this situation, as you mentioned, I was collaborating with a project called Science and Exile, which was the joint project of the International Science Council, the World of the Academy of the Sciences, and also the Inter-Academic Partnership, which I'm also a member of all these organizations. And those days in 2020, 21, I was supposing that I'm doing a really great job by helping the scientists that they are in exile because of the conflicts. Those days the focus was in Afghanistan because I had an experience being in Afghanistan, planning a workshop there with the help of the UNESCO and then with the help of the ICTP. But to be honest, I could never imagine that. How could be a life of a scientist in exile? And I could never imagine that the simple reaction of the resignation in support of my people who did the protest last September in the Human Life Freedom protest will lead me also to take that decision. When I took that decision, I was in a sabbatical leave for a research issue in Mexico. And I just packed my luggage just for 3 months to be there and come back home and then following my duties. But when the death of Mahsa Amini happened and I realized that I should do something, and the only reaction that I could do to being far from home was just resignation, because I didn't really want to work for the regime anymore. And I could not imagine that just in less than 12 hours, my family will be threatened in Iran by the intelligence service of the regime. And I realized that, okay, the call that my family received in Iran means that I should cancel my flight back home because that will be more dangerous. And then I started to be like more human activist, trying to do the humanitarian activities in support of the suppressions that they are happening inside of the University of Iran, and still I'm continuing that. So you can never imagine that as a scientist, how life could be changed for you. For example, now I have a friend now who is living in Gaza, and we are really worried about his life because it's almost a week that he is not even receiving our messages in Gaza because there is no internet. So you cannot imagine that how life can change for you as a scientist, that you don't want to save your science, you just want to save your life. And you imagine that the only career that you know is science, and you are expecting that scientific community help you to save your life. And I will tell you about that experiences, that how organizations that support scientists exile can help a lot to really facilitate this process and make it shorter. Thank you.
La vie est menacée. Merci. Merci beaucoup.
Important to realize in your in what you were saying.
Alors, c'est très important, cette situation que vous décrivez, c'est la situation en Iran, et qui a fait que vous vous retrouvez maintenant en Allemagne, semble. Et souvent, maintenant, si vous parlez aux gens de l'Iran, il y a très peu de gens qui ne réagissent pas du tout, ou ne se rendent pas compte justement à quel point le régime est oppressif. Tout le monde parle évidemment du conflit Israël-Hamas, mais ce sont des conflits qui durent et perdurent et qui ont des racines dans la région.
Seed with program. Carole. Et vous en français, en anglais, quelle serait votre anecdote qui vous porte à cette attention à la science en situation de conflit?
D'abord, merci de l'invitation. La question est vaste et la question est à la fois professionnelle et personnelle. Je pense comme la plupart d'entre nous. Je vais commencer en français, je changerai en anglais un peu plus tard, mais je pense qu'il faut d'abord honorer la science en français. Ça fait aussi partie du bagage qu'on véhicule au FRQ. Et les FRQ sont la première partie de ce qui n'est pas une anecdote, mais ce qui est ce que je crois les fonds ont réussi à construire. J'ai rejoint l'organisation il y a presque 5 ans maintenant, et j'ai rejoint une organisation dans laquelle on parle de diplomatie scientifique. Et pour moi, c'était un éveil, avant même d'être un réveil, de considérer, de réfléchir que la science a un rôle dans la diplomatie de la même manière que la diplomatie doit embrasser le fait scientifique pour être complète. So I think that this scientific diplomacy was this first thing that made me think, okay, I not only have to find the right program to fund research, I also have to think about how we can use research to make a better world, not only because we try to find some solutions, specific solutions to some issues, but also to some political issues, as it was said by NCA. And of course, I'm a European person, I'm a French person, a French citizen, I'm also a Canadian citizen. So when the conflict between Ukraine and Russia came in 2022, I just faced the feeling I had when I grew up, and I grew up with some sort of fear of how damageable it can be to be exposed to war. And so I have to say, okay, I'm lucky enough to be in an organization where we consider scientific diplomacy. I know that we have to find, as a person, any ways to fight, really fight conflict, wars, what can I do? And this is where, I was again lucky enough to find some mentors and a boss that I proposed him, what can we do? And Rémi Quirion said, whatever you want to do, just figure out, find a program, and we will see what we can do. He's a very good boss for this. I know he's in the room, so of course I'm going to say he's a very good boss. It's too easy. I remember I sent him an email on a Sunday morning saying we have to find a way, and he said, okay, just draw me a program and we were able to do it. But it was not the first one. I will be able to come back on this, but I also, as I said, I joined an organization where scientific diplomacy was high in the priorities, and we already had some programs. We had some program with Palestine, we had some program with some other parts in the world, so it was easy for me to jump in this.
Jeter à l'eau pour trouver ça. Bien, nous allons trouver cela, prendre cela au volet suivant. Alors, Myriam, les droits de la personne, au cœur même de votre parcours de recherche. Vous avez travaillé dans bien des endroits. Quelle est l'anecdote que vous souhaitez nous raconter? Alors.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup. I'm going to start in English and maybe switch over to French a little bit later. So, yeah, there's a link with my work as a researcher. I do research, action research in the field of human rights, meaning that for the last 15 years, I've been doing research projects for the promotion and the protection of human rights in collaboration with human rights defenders all over the world. And I would say that about 7 to 8 years ago, I noticed that our partner organizations or the human rights defenders that we work with increasingly actually became the victims of human rights violations themselves, meaning they became the targets of repression, of intimidation, of false accusations. And I knew that defending human rights is a dangerous job, but that was sort of the first time that I witnessed that firsthand. And this was independent of the issue at stake. Really, the common denominator was that they spoke out, they denounced, they criticized, they held the government accountable. And then in 2018, I think UCAM became a member of the Scholars at Risk network, and we held a conference at UCAM to launch the membership, and we invited a researcher from Syria, Anadi Ibrahim, who was a scholar at risk at Western University and at Simon Fraser in Vancouver. And she has a PhD in bioanalytical chemistry. Not necessarily somebody you would suspect to be the target of or for her research. As far as I knew, chemistry does not necessarily involve criticizing the government. And yet she became the target and she had to flee the country. So what I learned at that moment is that researchers, just like human rights defenders, they are considered a threat per se to many authoritarian regimes or in countries that are in conflict. So, because of their knowledge, because of their standing, because of their impact as educators, especially, they are considered threatening. And so, to this day, I sort of work on those two fronts, protection of human rights defenders and the protection of scholars at risk. And sometimes, they go hand in hand. Some human rights defenders are also scholars, and some scholars are also human rights defenders. So there's the overlap.
College of Scholars at Risk. Merci beaucoup.
Et on va passer à Carly. What is yours? The anecdote, that made you work on the topic that, involve, migrants coming from Europe to Canada in the 18th, 19th century, but now has taken, much broader amplitude.
Yeah, thank you. The research background actually got me invited to a workshop in Amsterdam in 2015. which brought together a lot of academic experts in various fields who dealt with migration in some way. And we've all been at conferences where you have brilliant people in the room and they all talk, and you leave and you're really worried that nothing is actually going to come out of it. And so when I was flying, I was in Scotland at the time. I was a member of the Young Academy of Scotland, and I thought, I don't want to leave this conference and nothing happen, and so what can I do in the world that I understand? And that world was research. And I was in a very privileged position because I was co-chair of the Young Academy of Scotland. And I thought, well, if I was a displaced researcher, what would it feel like? And then there must be colleagues in Scotland who want a connection to the academic world, but they don't know how to get it. And we could possibly create something that would allow them access. And so for me, it was wanting to make sure that colleagues who were committed to research like I was were able to continue with that. And I went to the president of the Royal Society of Edinburgh at the time was Jocelyn Bell-Burnell, and she was amazing. And she was enormously supportive from the beginning. And we had unanimous support from all of the members from the Royal Society of Edinburgh to just go forward with this. And so for me, it was not wanting to not do something.
So a call that was really
a call and
from within.
And a frustration with sometimes the way academia can be.
Yeah.
We can talk about a lot of things, but what are the actions? So I wanted an action.
So you're giving me the segue to continue with you, because, you know, I told you that I didn't know what was the order of speaking, but is this receiving the proper attention? I asked you a bit earlier this, Carole. And in your university, do you feel that the university is aligned between your thinking and the situation that is happening in conflict situation and what they are doing? Tell me about positive, negative outcomes. You know, what is your learning here?
Well, my university is because I'm there. I don't know if, it's hard because I come from a really small university, so they have to make really crucial decisions about where resources go, but they've been tremendously supportive. I think at the international level, there have been a lot of important positive changes that I've seen over the period that I've been doing this. When we started with the Young Academy of Scotland, we actually wrote to every senior science academy in the world asking them to help us. We got one reply.
Wow.
I think today we would get a lot more. And I think that's a testament to people kind of recognizing that there are strength in numbers, but also there are more and more conflicts happening, and there are more and more displaced colleagues around the world. And it feels like among academics and faculty members, once they know what's going on, because many people don't know about this at all, but once they know about it, I have never felt anything but tremendous support. Like, what can we do? So I've seen a lot of positives. What I think is maybe we still need to work on is some kind of uniformity where colleagues who are displaced actually know where to go. Because there are so many things now spiraling. There doesn't seem to be coordination. There also isn't enough resource.
You know, we're going to come back to this, but, you know, there's one thing I'd like to hear, you know, because I've seen so often in universities hesitation about researchers that are coming from other countries, and particularly countries that are not, you know, part of, you know, the world that we know. And this is an incredible asset for an organization, and I'd like, you know, at one point to hear a little bit more, or maybe pass the baton to NCA, because NCA is not with us tonight because she didn't get the visa. Very simple. NCA, up to you with the same question. You know, what is, you know, where you are currently and what you have been through, the type of support that is positive or having some, you know, challenges for you, and what is your learning?
Going to my experience, as I said, I was familiar with organizations that are helping the scientists in exile. They are really few of them. For example, the Scholar Rescue Fund, the Scholars at Risk, CARA, which is the Commission for At-Risk Scholars in England, and the other one is the PAUS, who you should find a host institute in France. And I experienced all of these when I was collaborating with the Science Exile project. And the point is that I was really familiar with these organizations. Imagine that you have a scholar that who become at risk because of any conflict that you can imagine, and he or she is not aware of such kind of organizations. So in that critical point, how that person can find the place to be really good. I was the one I was lucky somehow, saying, okay, I know them, they know also me very well because I collaborated with these people. And I just get wondered that when I wanted to prove that I'm at risk just because of the resignation, because some people suppose it as a joke, because they said that high resignation can lead to become exiled. So it was really difficult even now to convince people, okay, I'm coming from a country which is not a democratic one, the protests happen and all these things. Even some people cannot believe you. And imagine that how you can prove this to the organizations that they are doing that. And then they are asking several questions to be really convinced that as a scholar at risk, if they are going to suppose you, that you will not be able to come back home. And if you also come back home, your life will not be in danger, but probably you will not be able just to find a job. So it's really complicated situation. So you should prove that you are in this situation. You should find a host institute. So finding a host institute is not an easy process because, as I said, some of the programs are localized in a specific country. So you should really find an institute that can have as much as overlap with your scientific issue, because you don't want to lose your scientific background and you really want to continue your science. So it's really difficult to find in programs that they are specified in such kind of the issue. For example, STAR is just supporting the ones with the von Humboldt Foundation from Germany, PAUS supporting the ones in France. But one point that I really find it was really positive regarding PAUS that I realized, and is that when you apply for PAUS and when your application approved, they have a connection with the embassies. So they contact the embassies to get you the appointment really urgently. And of course, the process of the visa will be really fast because they have a special program for talented scholars. So they put you in that category and then they can issue the visa as fast as possible, let's say in 2 weeks. But for example, when I applied for a visitorship position that now I have in Germany for 6 months, I applied it in May and I got my visitorship position with my visa after 3 months. And then the embassy issued it for 3 months because they said, okay, your invitation letter was for 6 months and already 3 months of that passed. And although I put in my application, my interviews, even one of them was in German, to convince these people, okay, my life is in danger, but they never pay attention to that. So there is a solution, you know, as a science diplomacy, as Carol said, I know that the diplomacy the policy issue could be really slow, but if you be planned properly, as what the PAUS program had done, the scientists within a really critical situation at least can have a faster process of having, you know, visa issue. And also they have the organizations with different disciplines that if you cannot find a proper place to go, they help you to find a host institute, which most of the institutes, they don't do it because they don't have a category of the institutions that they can help scientists at risk. So which is one of the main issues. As Carly mentioned, one of the problems is that most of the scientific community, they are not aware of the situation of the at-risk scholars or being a scientist in the case of the refugee condition or displaced. So that's why they don't know how to help these people. When these people contact them saying, okay, I'm looking for a host institute, even the budget will come from another organization supporting these people. So they don't know how they should deal with these things because in most of the cases they see it as a political problem. I said, okay, we don't want extra headache by accepting someone who has problems of the policy or such kind of the things, and that's why maybe they don't collaborate even if they don't want to invest budget on that. So even when everything is free for them and they just need to give a office place for that person, not more than that, but they don't collaborate with these organizations. So one of the problems is the budget, of course, that these institutes are really few, and of course the other issue is that there are few host institutes, and the other process is the visa issue that could take longer, especially maybe you don't even have your proper documents with yourself because you are displaced. and you are not in a safe condition to wait for a long time.
Thank you, Ancien. And you know, many of the answer that has been given by you all talked a little bit, or some of you, science diplomacy. And you know, I've heard science diplomacy in the opening panel, you know, and I'm...
J'ai participé à d'autres panels scientifiques et j'écoutais les discours. Et j'hésite un petit peu à entreprendre la diplomatie scientifique parce que il y a souvent une perspective colonialiste sous-jacente. Alors, quelle sorte de lien avons-nous avec l'organisme hôte d'un chercheur en exil ou avec le pays une fois que la situation se rationalise? Et Karen, je me tourne vers vous parce que vous êtes au Fonds de recherche du Québec et vous avez de l'expérience avec ces programmes. Alors dites-moi, qu'est-ce que vous faites pour que ça marche dans les deux sens, pour le chercheur et pour nous au Canada, mais aussi
yeah, so maybe I'm going to be a little bit long, but I think that we need to understand what is the content of the Science in Exile program. And so first, it's a program that corresponds exactly to the mission of the FRQ. And that's a very important step as a beginning. So our mission is really to build research capacity for the Quebec province, and the way that we want to build research capacity is by supporting our own students, own researchers, own institutions, but it's also by building collaboration at the international level. And so keep this in mind. We build international collaboration. So, and this is the way that we were designing this program. First thing. The second intent was to keep in a safe place international students and international researchers already being in the Canada soil when the Ukraine war was starting, but after this any type of crisis. So it was, okay, you're here in Canada, you're here in the Quebec province, what can we do to support you, because we understand you cannot return right now in your country. It doesn't mean that you will not never return. It's just now, okay? So there is a time frame here. So the first step of the program was just to continue the support we already provided to these people. After this, we said, okay, there are some people not being able to build the research capacity they should build in their country because of this crisis. We can welcome them for a while, not forever. Okay, time for them to continue their scientific work, and when the period will be better, they could come back. Okay, so it was the second level of the program, welcome some students and welcome some researchers during the difficult time. But the last step, and it was already built when we started to think to the program, it was already here. It is, what can we do when the country will recover, whatever the crisis is? What can we do to be sure that these people can come back to their country and continue the collaboration we had with them? So here we think about some mobility program, international collaboration, so the type of programs that we already know, but les pensées en avance just help us to consider that they will come back. So it's not about keeping the mind here in Canada, it's continue to develop the mind of these people, the work they can do, to be sure that they could rebuild their country the time it will happen.
Les échanges avec le chercheur, une fois qu'il est retourné dans son pays, il doit retourner dans son pays. Alors, c'est important de faire connaître le début du programme. Parce que autrement, ça peut être une bombe à retardement. Mais il y a peut-être des programmes qui sont à long terme. Et ce n'est pas du tout une critique, pas du tout.
It's a diversity. It's about the length of the program, but you mention it. It is about to be very clear. It's not to get the best, les meilleurs cerveaux, the best brains, and keep them, and how cool we have them now, and we will build something. I mean, for some of them could stay, and that's great. I mean, I'm an immigrant, so and I think that why not? Okay, I hope. But it's really about people deciding what they want to do, but we need to build the bridge for them to come back. And here I have to say that the way we build programs is very important. If I have to redo it, I would like to have one scientific organization in the country which is in crisis and build this collaboration with this organization, just to be sure that we really have the bridge between the two countries.
J'aimerais m'assurer que nous avons un pont entre les deux pays. J'ai une question pour vous.
Your institution, you're at UCAP. You can feel free to bring it into the picture. Are they doing enough? Have you been supported? Are you alone?
Poser des questions. Est-ce que
talk about also your experience
vous avez aussi nous parler de l'expérience que vous avez eue?
And what's this doing, in lay terms?
Bon, je vais commencer avec l'UQAM. Alors, un peu comme Carly, heureusement, je travaille dans une institution qui est préoccupée par les enjeux sociaux, les enjeux d'actualité. L'objectif de notre département des sciences juridiques, c'est d'éduquer des juristes préoccupés par la justice sociale. Donc, au niveau institutionnel, je pense que je suis au bon endroit, à part peut-être le volet financier, mais bon, c'est une université publique, donc c'est très difficile de trouver les fonds pour faire des choses qui ne tombent pas directement dans notre mission. Donc, pour l'institution, je pense qu'il y a une belle... there's a nice level of awareness of the kind of issues that we're talking about. For the larger public, I'm not sure that that's always the case. I'm sure here in the room, everybody's like convinced that, science and research is important. I'm not sure the larger public is, always, how should I say, would always regard research as something that is worth protecting. Sometimes research is considered as something, of a passion, almost like a hobby, if you can't do research, well, just do something else or write about something else. And I'm afraid that's not how science works. And B, that's exactly what those who persecute, who threaten, who arrest scholars, that's exactly what they want, that you stop doing what you're doing. So I think there's some work to be done in terms of raising awareness as to why scientists or scholars find themselves in exile, that, they have powerful voices, and usually they may use those voices to speak up for a greater good, to represent a larger public. And when those voices are taken away from them, when they go into exile and all of a sudden they're a nobody in a place they don't know, well, that means that, the representation of that greater good, of that larger public also fades away. So, I think we have to make it more well known, that inherent logic of why scientists are being persecuted. And maybe if we understand that, there will be more initiatives, more funding, specific immigration pathways, etc. Now, Scholars at Risk in particular, if I can just say a few words about that, Scholars at Risk is an international network network of higher education institutions, mostly universities. It has more than 650 members in, I think, 46 countries right now. And what SAR mainly does is invite its member institutions to temporarily host scholars who are in danger or in exile. And I think the advantage of that is, first of all, it's easier to have such a big network behind this cause. It's easier to identify scholars. It's easier to find resources for those scholars. It's easier to exchange ideas, to exchange best practices, to find funding also. So it makes it easier to give a place to those scholars where they can continue their work. And I think SAR also makes it possible to show more solidarity within the academic community in favor of academic freedom, in favor of human rights, by hosting a scholar to signal, whether that is internally or externally, that as scholars we do not accept that our voices are taken away from us, that we show solidarity with other scholars that are in danger or in exile.
Et que nous sommes tous solidaires en tant que chercheurs et scientifiques.
Now we're going to go to the last round. You have all 3 minutes because you don't want the audience to have the opportunity to ask you questions. Maximum 3 minutes.
Je vais donner 3 minutes chacune parce que je veux pour nous avons parlé beaucoup de choses. Vous avez vécu. Parlez-moi un peu plus du domaine sur lequel que nous devrions approfondir. Alors, vous avez parlé de participer à règlement de paix, soutenir les institutions financièrement, ensuite la collaboration internationale pour résoudre les conflits, et aussi l'éducation. Poursuivre le développement des capacités et le développement des capacités scientifiques, parce que souvent les chercheurs en exil voient la structure dans laquelle ils travaillent s'écrouler. La liste est interminable. Et donc, je commence avec vous, Nancy. Je vais vous demander votre perspective.
Science and Exile program. Tell us a little bit
de votre programme mondial pour les scientifiques en exil. Alors, quelle serait la chose la plus facile à réparer ou à corriger?
I just want to emphasize that first we should know that what are the conflicts, because sometimes we don't even have the right definition for the conflicts. For example, in my case, when the protests happened, nobody considered it as conflicts, but thousands of students lost their right for education. More than 700 faculty members get fired, so of course they are at risk now, but of course they cannot find a position for all of them. So first we should define the conflicts. I can even add that sanctions also could be considered as conflicts. Exactly today I was reading an article in Science regarding the situation of the Russian scientists right now during the war, that many organizations putting the Russian scientists under sanctions, not collaborating with them anymore. Even CERN, which is the symbol of the science diplomacy for us, saying that, okay, in 2024 we will ban our collaboration with Russian scientists. And imagine that this institute, which was the symbol of the science diplomacy, taking such kind of decision. Imagine how the other organizations will be followed. I just wanted to mention that as a scientist, we should not have diplomacy in science. We should have a diplomacy for science. And unfortunately, these days we see that with the conflicts. Unfortunately, even the scientific community following the decisions of the politicians, and they are not aware that they are losing their academic freedom. Because if the head of your university, the minister of your higher education, banning you to collaborating with a specific topic or even with a specific scientist, you are losing your academic freedom, and you will pay for that in future if you don't really pay attention to that. So first we should define what conflicts we are going to support, and if there are also conflicts, for example, like war that we know that happening almost everywhere, we should treat all the people equally. We should not just say that, okay, we have a budget for Ukrainians, but we don't have a budget for Afghanistan. We have, we should treat all the people equally. politically, which makes me really sad, because after the collaboration with Science Style Project that you always have the funding problem, I realized that when the problem of the Ukraine and Russia happened, there was a budget for Ukrainians. And that's why the issue of the science and exile become really hot topic these days after the war. I'm somehow happy because that somehow gives awareness about what's happening. But I'm just worried that if the war stops, then we're going to be going to these projects that they are already on the table to help the scientists in exile. Are they going to be cut completely, or they are going to be devoted to the other, problems or conflicts that are going to happen in future? And the other last point that I want to mention, that it's not just important to save the life of the scientists, it's also the preservation of science, which we don't really pay attention to that, because we cannot help all the scientists in exile, but we can help science in general by preserving the infrastructures, libraries, and all these things that they are in the countries that they are in conflicts. This is the point that almost none of the organizations supporting the scholars actually is paying attention to that, and that's really important because the conflict will over. One day that everything will be over, but how that scientists will be able to come back home if there is no structure anymore to continue the science, and we are supposed to support that scientist forever because there is no lab, no institute, no research center to come back and do that science. Thank you.
Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Carole.
Pourquoi moi maintenant? Je pense que tous les points qui ont été mentionnés dans la question sont des points qui sont absolument nécessaires à tenir en compte si on veut être sérieux dans la façon dont on aborde la science en exil. Je vais y aller avec un certain nombre de points qui me paraissent absolument nécessaires pour lever les difficultés, avoir du succès, je ne sais pas comment le dire. Science en exil aujourd'hui au FRQ, c'est 35 personnes, étudiants, chercheurs, chercheuses qui sont soutenus, 2 millions de dollars investis. Puis il y a un certain nombre de facteurs qui font qu'on a réussi à faire ça. Premièrement, tout à l'heure, on parlait de la frilosité des universités. On a eu la chance de ne pas avoir une frilosité des universités. Et je pense que c'est très important d'avoir les universités comme des partenaires quand on accueille du monde, quand on maintient du monde, et quelle que soit l'origine de la personne qui est en exil et du scientifique qui est en exil, on a un certain partage de risques qui s'opère. On l'a dit avec les visas, avec est-ce que la personne va rester, pas rester, et le fait d'avoir le partenaire universitaire qui est engagé dans cette espèce de partage de risques ou d'incertitudes est extrêmement important. So I think that the partnership with university is absolutely key if we want to succeed. Whatever the organization that we have to stay with our mission. On doit rester dans notre cœur de métier, c'est ce qu'on sait faire. We are facing the visa issue, even as a FRQ. I mean, we are not able to deliver visa. We know that it's really the key issue that we're facing. We can try to explain to some ministries, to some government that we're thinking, when they were thinking to embargo about gas or oil embargo, maybe they should think about what they want to do with research. Could be a good idea, could make our job easier, but it's not our mandate to deliver this visa. So be very clear with this mandate that we may have. We have to pay attention that we cannot apply the same rules that we always apply. I put a lot of pressure with my team to find solution. We do not do as we always do. I cannot ask for some relevé de notes, okay? Most often people don't have them. So we have to be creative, we have to avoid the administrative burdens that normally we could face. So very important, and I mentioned in an ideal way have an organization in the other country to be in collaboration with, and prévoir le retour.
Avec qui, avec
Really, prévoir le retour. Be sure that we help people to build this. We always talk about l'économie du savoir, and it's not only here the économie du savoir, it's all around the world. So I will stop here.
Je ne suis pas sûr que ce soit ça la bonne expression.
To the preservation of that knowledge. And Mirya, you know, from a human right, you know, do you think that this preservation of knowledge, you know, this is one aspect that I know you're fond of, but, you know, into the priorities for the future, where do you see this fitting, or are there other things that needs to be fitted?
Well, human rights, at their core, they're about humans, right? And the most important right is the human right to dignity. So I think whatever we do, it must never be to the detriment of human dignity. And that may mean very different things to different people. You know, you may have researchers in exile, where science is what keeps them going despite all the hardships that they may endure, because doing research is also something, you know, we do by conviction, through a sense of urgency, I guess. And then you have other researchers in exile that I guess for them, just, you know, science or research is only possible without hardship, because in order to think, in order to develop ideas, in order to discuss, you sort of need some peace of mind. So I'm afraid there's no one size fits all. I think the individual should be at the center of all our considerations. What are the needs of that person? How can we support that person going forward? And yeah, so I think it's an approach that is focused on the human being that we're dealing with.
Yeah, and the respect.
Exactly.
Et le respect, bien sûr.
Carly, I promise
Alors
you,
maintenant,
you're the
Carly,
one
je vous
that
ai
spoke last
promis
in the first round. You speak last in the last round, and I promise you to come back to art.
et donc je vous ai promis de revenir à la question de l'art et de la science. Est-ce que vous voulez peut-être évoquer cette question de l'art et de la science?
Yeah, and it fits with the priority area. So I was delighted earlier when science diplomacy was flagged as important, because I think that we need to see the scientists in exile as part of the science diplomacy landscape. And I think it has to connect with Canada's responsibility globally, because Canada is a very privileged country that has to support a healthy global ecosystem, and we can't have that if certain people aren't allowed at the table, or if their research is dismissed or destroyed. And so one of the things that we do with the Royal Society of Canada, for example, with our program there, is we offer workshops, because what we don't want is colleagues to be brought into Canada to fail, where they come in and they get a placement, and it's similar to what you just said. They get a placement of 1 or 2 years, but they're often not given a proper welcome or communication about how the research ecosystem works in Canada, what's going to be expected of them, how it's different. And so the workshops that we give are actually peer-to-peer. They're professors to professors. And that makes a big difference, because colleagues tell me that it means that they're not infantilized, they're not treated like people who are not equal. And I think that that's an area that we really need to work on if we are going to bring colleagues into Canada. It's the same in the UK, in the European Union. You have to be able to provide the support to set them up for success, because it goes back to the point about dignity. And that is the main thing I think we all have to be concerned about with this.
Good, thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup.
16:30. I keep 5 minutes at the end for our panelists to wrap it up with one-liner. Time is for you. Any question, any observation, any comment?
Y a-t-il des questions, des commentaires? Nous avons 2 microphones disponibles. Et sinon, nous poursuivons la conversation. Allez-y, je vous en prie. Donc veuillez décliner votre identité.
m'entendez?
Oui, absolument. Allez-y.
Donc, je travaille pour un organisme subventionnaire de la recherche au Canada, mais là, j'aimerais parler à titre personnel. Je m'appelle Ija. Déjà, j'aimerais remercier les FRQ d'avoir ouvert cet espace de réflexion. Je trouve que c'est très important et très nécessaire. Je vais peut-être m'inscrire un faux par rapport à ce qui vient d'être dit, mais je le fais dans un esprit de respect et de réflexion collective.
Allez-y.
Donc, je pense que le travail que vous faites est très louable, que ce soit à l'ISC ou à l'UQAM ou bien au FRQ, avec ce programme dont je ne connaissais pas l'existence. C'est très, très important. Ceci étant dit, il y a déjà des années, dans une association scientifique à laquelle j'appartiens, on avait commencé à parler de cette initiative de Scholars at Risk. Certains et certaines d'entre nous avons décidé de ne pas y participer, le temps et les ressources étant limités, pour plusieurs raisons. La première, c'est que nous considérions, à l'époque, je considère toujours, que cette approche, bien sûr, il vient répondre à un besoin vital, littéralement vital, de survie des gens qui sont en risque, dont leur vie est en risque. Donc c'est très important. Je ne dis pas que ça n'est pas. Mais ça établit en quelque sorte une hiérarchie dans la valeur de la vie humaine. Comme si les scientifiques, les artistes parfois, méritaient d'être sauvés, dont leur vie vaudrait plus que celle d'autres personnes qui sont dans une situation de risque aussi. Par ailleurs, nous avons décidé de consacrer nos efforts plutôt à nous assurer que dans les pays dits du Nord global, les droits des réfugiés soient respectés, parce que c'est un droit beaucoup plus vaste et plus égalitaire. Et donc, en fait, souvent, ce qui se passe avec ces initiatives, qui, encore une fois, sont très louables et très importantes, elles viennent dédouaner les États de leurs responsabilités en matière de droit international, de droit de la personne. Donc, ça, c'est un autre élément important. Et le troisième élément, c'est que souvent, quand on mène ces discussions avec la raison humanitaire en tête uniquement, on oublie les enjeux géopolitiques. Et donc, ce qui se passe souvent dans des réseaux comme, je ne dis pas forcément celui de l'UQAM, mais celui que je veux dans mon association, c'est que les décisions étaient prises d'une manière très opportuniste parfois, répondant aux conflits qui étaient dans les journaux ce jour-là. Donc, ce sont des choix à géométrie variable. Et comme disait notre intervenante, qui je crois est en Allemagne, mais vient de l'Iran, on ne peut pas commencer à être sélectif par rapport à la vie des gens, laquelle compte plus que l'autre, surtout quand certains conflits ne sont pas reconnus. Donc je suis née, j'ai grandi en Colombie, un pays qui a été ravagé par une guerre pendant des décennies. Avec le Canada, il n'y a jamais eu de problème parce que le Canada considérait que la Colombie était une démocratie. Souvent, ce qu'on évite de faire, c'est de parler en fait du rôle du Canada dans ce conflit, le rôle de compagnie minière canadienne dans ce conflit. Et donc, je crains que parfois, avec des initiatives qui se centrent uniquement sur la raison humanitaire, on perd de vue ce contexte géopolitique plus large. Donc voilà, merci.
Est-ce que vous avez une question?
Non, c'était plutôt c'est un commentaire.
Merci pour vos observations qui sont fort appréciées. Reaction or comments to the observation that were shared by
Y a-t-il des...
Oui, je vais rebondir sur ça. Premièrement, merci des commentaires, puis merci de le faire en tout respect. C'est jamais facile de regarder comment on va intervenir. Puis je vais réagir en toute humilité parce qu'on s'est demandé cette question-là. Je vais reprendre le dernier point. Pourquoi ce pays? Pourquoi un autre? Comment est-ce que ça s'inscrit? Je pense que c'est comme ça qu'on a migré assez rapidement en une année de quelque chose qui était très Ukraine, parce que c'était émotif à ce moment-là, dans un programme qui est devenu Science en exil, où en fait la ligne conductrice de Science en exil, c'est toute situation d'urgence. Puis toute situation d'urgence, ça devient une situation géopolitique, ça devient une situation de flux migratoire climatique, c'est comme on l'a dans la face, ça devient une situation d'un d'une crise environnementale qui peut arriver, peu importe. Et là, le partenariat devient comme le FRQ, la personne qui sollicite l'aide, l'université, son équipe d'accueil, comment est-ce qu'on définit cette situation-là d'urgence. Donc, c'est pas idéal, mais ça vient répondre un petit peu à ce contexte que vous décriviez. Pour le reste, je partage. Les scientifiques, c'est pas mieux que les artistes, pas mieux que rien. C'est chacun dans notre métier, on essaye de faire ce qu'on peut.
Merci. Thank you very much.
Est-ce que je peux juste dire un petit mot?
Myriam, Madame professeure Triche, il est tard. Allez-y.
Il n'y a pas de problème. Vous avez tout à fait raison. Les scientifiques ne sont pas plus importants ou plus importantes que d'autres personnes qui sont en danger. Mais le milieu, parce que Scholars at Risk, c'est un réseau d'universités. Alors, qu'est-ce que les universités ont à offrir? Ben, c'est le milieu universitaire. Donc, c'est là que le programme, disons, prend tout son sens, qu'on peut accueillir des personnes, tandis qu'on n'a peut-être pas le même milieu à offrir à, je ne sais pas, des personnes qui travaillent dans d'autres métiers. Alors, on fait ce qu'on peut dans notre milieu, mais ce n'est pas pour dire que les autres ont moins besoin ou méritent moins d'avoir de l'aide. Puis, des programmes existent aussi pour d'autres professions, mais il ne faut pas non plus mélanger, disons, réfugiés avec personnes en exil, parce que généralement, les personnes qui sont en exil ne veulent justement pas avoir ce statut de réfugié, parce que ça les empêcherait très probablement de retourner dans leur pays d'origine à un moment donné. Alors, de passer par le chemin des réfugiés, c'est souvent pas une option pour ces personnes-là. Et ils vont rester dans la situation, continuer à travailler dans des circonstances où ils sont en danger, plutôt que prendre le chemin de l'asile. Donc, c'est une option qui s'ajoute à d'autres, mais ce n'est pas pour dire que les autres méritent moins d'aide.
Merci pour ces précisions, Myriam. Madam, please.
Yeah, hello everyone. Thank you so much for esteemed speakers and moderator. Thank you so much. This is Sajja Al-Zobi from St. Mary's University. I'm a co-leader of At-Risk Scholar Initiative from Global Link Academy. Actually, I wish I have time to go with you word by word, because I'm so interested in what you have actually examined and what you have explained. I really appreciate about mentioning this point in terms of dignity and in terms of solidarity, in terms of diversity. But I'm really wondering why no one mentioned the added value that those human beings, that those scholars, at-risk scholars, gonna add to the home country, to the host countries, to their home countries, and to the host countries as well, and to the neighboring countries, because they are international. They're gonna be international contributors. So that's what we can see from NCA. NCA, although the sanctions ban against Iran, and she proved herself as international scholar. So all of that, the whole point is not about charity. It's not about that we get those scholars and put them here because we want to help them, but those scholars really can add value to the host communities, to the host institutions. But I really, really appreciate that you get this topic on the board, and I'm interested in this. I'm going to talk about this tomorrow.
I don't want to cut you short, but your question is a brilliant question, and why don't you ask the panelists? The question, why haven't you talked about, the benefit to the host country?
I'm sure they are aware of that, but usually it's maybe people don't mention this because they consider it that the humanity is most important than to mention something else. So they focus more on solidarity and diversity and humanity. But there are many. It's not in SIA only. There are many examples of this. And one point, last point.
You have one question, and you have about 24 seconds.
Okay, that's it, because tomorrow I'm going to talk about something relative, so
My apologies, I'm looking at the time and I've been asked to keep on the schedule, madame. Je suis désolé, I'm really sorry.
No, I fully understand. That's okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your observation.
Bien, merci.
Carly.
Yeah, Saja and I know each other really well, and it's the right question, and I absolutely agree. And I think in this moment, one of the reasons why we're involved in this, for me, it's nothing to do with charity. For me, it is making sure the global research ecosystem works, but also the work that certainly me and you and colleagues are involved with is to try to make sure there's space at the table for colleagues who have been excluded. So we can talk about EDI. This is a component of trying to make space for colleagues who would not be able to open any doors, because coming into Canada, a completely new environment, a completely new research world, it's almost impossible to break through. And when I was working in Scotland, we had a colleague from Yemen. He didn't get any replies to his emails until he mentioned he had a mentor with the Royal Society of Edinburgh, and then all of a sudden he got replies. So it's about opening doors and enabling space, and then colleagues can go and create their own opportunities.
Okay.
Bien, merci.
May I add something to this question?
Go ahead. You have 1 minute.
Yeah. Actually, in the case of the integrity, there are also solutions for that from the beginning. As far as I'm aware, some of these scholarships that given or fellowships that were given to the asterisk scholars, in most of the countries, they are tax-free. This means that you don't pay for the pensions, you don't pay for the taxes, you don't pay for the health, because they give you as a, looks like somehow charity. And that the point is that imagine that you get this fellowship for 2 years, and you cannot come back home after 2 years, but you are trying to find a solution to really find a job in that country. But the point is that you waste your time for 2 years because you stayed in academia, you of course you saved your scientific background, but you don't pay for the pension, you don't pay for the taxes, and of course you cannot claim that you are part of this society if you want to become the citizen of that country. So you don't feel from the beginning that you receive that fellowship that you are part of this society. You say, okay, I'm just a guest here for 2 years maximum, because most of the fellowships are just 2 years, and after that I should leave because they don't want me, because they don't allow me from the beginning that I feel myself as part of the society. I'm not talking about the welcoming issue of the host institutes, how they can help you to find, I don't know, flats, or having the mental problems. Of course, all these exiled scientists, they have a mental issue. Never really talk about these things, and I suppose that, okay, you saved your career, and of course you should work as a normal person, and they don't really realize that, okay, you lost everything in your life just because of decision, your family, your country, your home, your job, your friends, everything that you build up for years and years, and of course you are going to have a problem. That's why you cannot integrate in the society, because from the beginning the fellowship defined in a way that you cannot be part of the society later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ancien. Okay, the message to take home. What would it be from your perspective, Carole, for our audience? If not to take home, to take at the cocktail and pursue the conversation. Please.
OK, on est entre maintenant et le cocktail. Excusez-moi, puis je suis pas une bonne élève, j'ai 2 messages.
Allez-y.
Le premier, c'est je voudrais remercier d'abord. Je voudrais remercier toutes les personnes qui croient à des programmes comme Science en exil. J'ai mentionné Rémi, mais il y a des personnes dans mon équipe. Je voudrais mentionner Marine, je voudrais mentionner Michael, je voudrais mentionner Isabelle, ils se reconnaîtront. C'est important de le dire parce que si ces gens-là ne transforment pas ce qu'on a dans les idées, ça ne marche pas. Ça, c'est point numéro 1. Point numéro 2, pourquoi on fait ça? Puis je pense que Carly, je pense que Myriam l'ont dit, tout le monde l'a dit. Je pense qu'on fait ça parce que la construction, et ça a l'air naïf, mais c'est pas naïf, la construction d'un pays, qu'il soit en crise ou qu'il ne soit pas en crise, passe par, à un moment donné, le niveau de formation, le niveau d'éducation de sa communauté. communauté. Puis pour nous, ça passe par la création, la formation d'une communauté scientifique forte. Alors si à un moment donné, on est un bridge dans cette communauté scientifique, ben, je pense que c'est pour ça qu'on fait ça puis qu'on appuie ça.
Merci, Carole. Myria, tu vois l'horloge qui roule. Ton message.
Okay, 20 seconds. I think for me, the main barrier right now is immigration. Honestly, it's a nightmare to get a scientist in exile into Canada. And Ancia talked about this. There are countries like Germany that have federal programs with designated immigration pathways with that come with funding. So I think Canada should take example on those countries, and maybe we have raised sufficient awareness for that to happen tonight.
Excellent. Merci.
Merci. The only point I would make is if you are in a university and you hold a powerful position, speak to the person in charge who has the ability to offer placements to colleagues and ask them for longer than 2 years, because it's not enough.
Thank you very much. Nancy, you have the famous last word. What is the take-home message from your position, carrying words from Germany, but also from the heart from your fellow Iranian scientists?
Évidemment, vous êtes en
Just one sentence. Please keep science neutral without any border. Otherwise, we will not be able to help any conflict situation. Doesn't matter. It's the preservation of the science in any case, or the challenges that we are facing, or the issue of the at-risk scholars. Science should be kept neutral and should also treat all the scientists equally. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nancy.
Merci beaucoup, Nancy. Mesdames et messieurs, merci beaucoup de votre attention. Alors, cela termine notre panel sur l'influence du conflit sur la science. Je pense que j'ai beaucoup apprécié la conversation que nous avons eue avec Nancy, nos collègues Carly, Myriam et Carole.
C'est un plaisir pour moi d'être avec vous. Je vous souhaite une bonne soirée. Thank you very much.